And now, broadcasting from deep behind enemy lines in the occupied territory of the Socialist Republic of California, your host, former California State Assemblyman and Governor candidate, Tim Donnelly.
Hey, welcome back to the show. We're going to dedicate today's show to the memory of a great First Lady, a lady with a tremendous amount of class. That was First Lady Nancy Reagan, who on Saturday passed away at the age of 94. And what an extraordinary individual, what an extraordinary story. She was married to former President Ronald Reagan for 52 years and was really the light of his life. They were fiercely devoted to each other, and she played a big role. Not the same kind of role that First Ladies play today, but she was definitely a very, very active individual within politics. She was an actress, and she was someone that I believe helped make President Ronald Reagan a much better man and a much better president, because she was really one of his close advisors. And you got to read a lot of letters and a lot of their stories to understand how close and how much of an influence she had. And I don't think we've ever really seen anything like that in the White House. And she also, when he came down with Alzheimer's, she was there to guide him. She was there to protect him. She was there to take care of him, and that cannot have been an easy thing. And anyway, rest in peace, Nancy Reagan, former First Lady and great American. Godspeed to you as you go and join Ronnie. Hey, in other news, this really just struck me. I don't know how you feel about it, but Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders they're gonna do a Fox News town hall, and that's news. And the more I looked at the headline, the more I realized how not shocking it should be, and yet it is. You've got the Republicans who have subjected themselves to CNN. They've subjected themselves to MSNBC, to NBC, and all ABC, and all these other stations, and all these other left stream news media. And wow, Hillary and Bernie are going to sit down with a news network that represents pretty much the other half of the country that is Republican or even somewhat conservative. This is really going to be their first engagement. And it goes to show you that even though CNN is almost identical to Fox, they're both ideologically based news networks that provide a lot of entertainment. CNN has a leftist bent, and all of their hosts have a leftist bent, and Fox is the opposite. And most of their hosts are either center right or, maybe more to the far right. But the bottom line is both of them have become sort of staples in American politics. But the idea that Democrats never go on Fox News, never confront or are challenged by a differing opinion, because they wouldn't want to subject themselves to that, is rather shocking. I think it's just one of those little tiny details that came up. Obviously, there's big news. The state of the primary is thus. It is tightening. There's a big race in Michigan tomorrow, and let me read you the where people are. You have Donald Trump, 384 delegates so far. He's won a number of states, including a couple over the weekend. Ted Cruz won a couple of states over the weekend. He's at 300. So Trump is only 84 delegates ahead of Cruz. It's really a tight race. Rubio's back at 151, and John Kasich has 37. And I'm sure that he will probably win Ohio. I would expect Kasich to do fairly well in Michigan, because Michigan and Ohio are very similar states, even though their football teams hate each other. And that's just a separate matter. Hillary is at 672 delegates, and Bernie's not far behind at 477. It's kind of funny how his delegate count has picked up, even though he has not won virtually any states since he won New Hampshire in such an epic contest. And but let me give you the states that individuals have won. So you have Donald Trump has won New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada. Hold on here. Wait a minute. That doesn't look right. Did Trump win South Carolina? I don't think he did. He did? Yeah. Because I'm looking at this thing and it's got check marks. I'm thinking that means victory. Yeah, because he won Nevada. All right. Yeah, I know what I'm doing here. Alabama, Arkansas. He also got Georgia, Massachusetts, Tennessee, Vermont, Virginia, Kentucky, Louisiana. Those were just over the weekend, and that gives him his 384. Now, here's the states that Cruz won. Cruz has won Iowa. You remember that? That was the first race. Alaska. I guess Sarah Palin's endorsement of Trump didn't help him as much as he might have hoped. Oklahoma, Texas, where he got 102 delegates. Kansas, Maine, and that's it for him. And then Marco Rubio, here's his states. It's a much shorter list. Minnesota and Puerto Rico. And then Kasich has no wins, but he's still in the running. He's coming in fourth. Hillary has Iowa, Nevada, South Carolina, Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Massachusetts, Tennessee, Texas, Virginia, American Samoa, Louisiana. And you know what's funny is her victories very closely mirror Trump's. I know there's some polls out that say that in a straight up race, and I found this fascinating. It's on Real Clear Politics that in a straight up race, Cruz can win, Kasich can win, Rubio can win against Hillary, but the only one who can't win is Trump. And I'm curious what you think of that, because I have some theories on this, and for a very, very specific reason that I believe that Trump may represent a greater threat in the general election than any of the other candidates, but it's just my own theory. I'd love to hear what you think. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. 323-746-TALK. We have a fantastic guest coming up at the top of the hour. You cannot miss a single minute, so don't touch that dial. Hey, welcome back. You have found your way to the Radio Free California Network, and I am your host, Tim Donnelly, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in the state of California. Here's the thing. The state of the primary, the 2016 presidential primary is this. There are advisors telling Rubio to get out of Florida before he loses. Trump is doing well there. He's up only 8 points. His lead has been cut. Everything has tightened. Cruz has clearly advanced forward. And I would say most of it's Trump's fault for saying really, really stupid things on TV that didn't need to be said. You know, there's a point at which you just don't respond. You just shut up and you don't say anything. There's no response required. When your opponent is making a fool of himself, and when Romney was making a fool of himself, he should have just had class and ignored him or said one line with a little humor. I don't know if Trump has hired any new advisors or if he's going to. I don't think he'll make it if he doesn't. He needs some people around him that will not be yes men, that will say, look, it's great to be Donald Trump and be Donald Trump on the issues. But when it comes to people and personalities, you lose a chunk of your support every time you personally attack someone you shouldn't have, make fun of someone you shouldn't have, make a really deprecating, not self-deprecating would be great. I don't think he's ever made any self-deprecating jokes. But when you delve into, it's one thing for it to be very, very, very subtle sexual innuendo. It's another thing for it to be so overt and so constant a theme. Look, you're running for president of the United States. You're not running for, man, whore in chief or whatever. I mean, you're not running to be the next Bill Clinton. You're running to actually, hopefully, do something to turn this country around. And at any rate, here's my theory. Well, before I get to it, I'm going to go to the phones and get yours. 323-746-TALK. Hey, give me your first name and city, please.
Jerry Hesperia.
Hey, Jerry, how are you?
I'm excellent. Just listening to you as far as Trump and all that good stuff, and I believe you're right. I think a lot of people would feel a lot more comfortable if he had a little bit more or a better demeanor as he says things, a little bit more, quote, presidential. Because I have to say he's spot on many things, but he's just got that rough edge. And
it's so unnecessary. It's so unnecessary. And here's the thing, Jerry. Ronald Reagan was really rough around the edges when he first started, not to the same extreme as Trump. And they took him away to Malibu for a weekend. And the two very liberal consultants tuned him up. Not to change his beliefs, but to improve his style and his mannerisms and sort of how he was dealing with people and answering things, and gave him a little bit of polish. You need some. You don't need to be completely polished, to where you're a Rubio Robotron, where every time, or someone who just can't answer a question without going into the, some staid, stump speech. But he could definitely use some spit shine.
I totally agree, because like in the general election, say going up against Hillary, which I'm just going to go ahead and say it. Anyone that votes for her, I wonder. They're just too much against her. If there was a little more polish on Trump, I think he'd be just heads and tails above everybody that much more.
Oh, I would agree with you that you have all these polls that have the Republicans winning against Hillary. The only problem with that is most of those candidates are not winning enough delegates to actually get into the election. Kasich is never going to get there. Rubio's never going to get there. So it's either Cruz or Trump. Here's the problem with that showdown. Right now, I hear from some people who say, well, I'm done with Trump. He just offended me one time too many, so I'm going to vote for Cruz. And then there's the crossover vote that's needed right now to win, because unless there's just monumental Republican turnout in the general election, you need some Democrats and a lot of independents to cross that line. And for some reason, and I've heard this from a lot of callers, I've heard this from people I've talked to out in the public, friends of mine, there's just something about Cruz that makes them not want to vote for him, that makes them not like him. And some people say they don't trust him. And, on the other side, you got Trump, who has super high negatives. People either love him or hate him. There's no middle ground. It isn't about liking him. He is likable when he's not being a total absolute jerk. But there's an awful lot of Democrats that have been in these primaries, particularly Ohio and some other states, that are switching over to go vote for Trump, and mainly on the immigration issue. So that's what I think we're facing. But here's the thing, Jerry. The only candidate that everyone is consistently attacking is usually a good sign that that is the person who is the greatest threat to the powers that be, the political establishment. And that's Trump.
Oh, definitely. he made, people talk about he's had some pitfalls, some bankruptcies, odds and ends, but he's rebuilt. He said he apparently has people around him that know what they're doing, and he is a success in many ways, even with his colorful demeanor at times. But one of the other things that I would find very interesting, as you were talking about the delegates and stuff, I wonder how that's running in line with popular votes and stuff, because that's something that is always a question, is you get all the electoral college, the delegates, but where do you sit with popular vote as well?
Yeah, and that is a good question, and I don't think you're going to see a direct correlation between popular vote and electoral votes right now. Because Hillary clearly has won way more of the popular vote now than Sanders has, because she's won a number more states, and yet you have them very, very close together now in the delegate race, and a lot of the delegate race is jury rigged. You can have super delegates who represent party hacks and elected officials, but they don't actually represent people. So right. There's this strange system where the delegate system overwhelms the popular vote in the primaries. Now, in the general, that's a whole nother question.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate all the questions that you're putting out there and getting people thinking, because we are in a time that people have got to think and not just sit back on their laurels as far as I'm a staunch Democrat, I'm a staunch Republican. I just wish people would get it together and be staunch Americans.
Well, Jerry, I couldn't have said it better myself. That's a great way to end the call. Thanks for the call. Thanks for listening, and Godspeed, my friend.
You have a great day.
It's definitely going to be a fantastic show. We're off to a good start, but wait till you hear my friend Chris Ann Hall, who is coming up a little bit later on in the show, so you're going to have to stay tuned. She is a former Democrat turned constitutionalist. She has an incredible background. When I read you a little bit of her history, you're going to be shocked. And before she comes on, I'm going to read a bit of it, because I want you to familiarize yourself. But this is an individual who is lighting the country on fire, and when you hear her, you will understand why. So make sure you tell a couple of friends to tune in. She is coming up a little bit later on in the show, but wow, I'm really, really looking forward to this. I had to book her in advance, and she's in huge demand. And the reason is simply that there are so few people with the courage to speak the truth. And it doesn't matter whether you love Trump or hate Trump, he speaks the truth. Cruz is out there speaking the truth. You may hate his campaign. I hate his campaign, but I like Ted Cruz, okay? I hate his campaign because it's run by establishment hacks who have done dirty tricks, and Ted Cruz gets blamed for it. And, it's unfortunate, because one of these two guys is going to be our standard bearer by all accounts that I can see. So, hey, whatever you do, don't touch that dial. I'll be right back after these messages. Hey, welcome back. And yes, you have found your way to the Radio Free California Network. And I am your host, Tim Donnelly, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in the state of California. This snowy state. Well, I guess in some areas it's raining, but we got a good deal of snow, and it is still snowing. I just opened the garage and looked out, and lo and behold, the snow. I shoveled almost the entire driveway. It is now completely covered again, as if I never even shoveled it. I'm definitely going to get my exercise today. So I mentioned a Real Clear Politics poll, And I want to walk you through it by the numbers so that you'll understand what I'm talking about, not just insider baseball. We're going to start out with the general election. This is Real Clear Politics. What they do is they list all the polls that are out there current. So this would be a poll from, 210 through 227. And it's, and that's an average. So they're taking an average of the various polls. One's CNN, one's Fox, one's Quinnipiac, and one's USA Today. And they all have, a margin of error like 3%. So Cruz would be at 49% on the CNN poll, Clinton 48%. In the Fox News poll, 46% for Cruz, 45% for Clinton. Quinnipiac is 46-43, and then USA Today is 45-44. So that's where the polling is at right now for Cruz. But I got to warn you, when people are projecting a general election poll and you're not even through the primary, the only problem with the numbers you're putting out is a lot of people, it's all theoretical. The attack machine has not yet begun. You don't have everything that's going to happen between June, because California, I believe, has one of the last polls going on, elections, primaries, which is June 7th. But you've got to take this a little bit with a grain of salt. And yet, if you're a Trump lover, out there, you got to do something to help your boy, because he's the only guy who in these polls is not winning in the general election because his unfavorables are so high. And, so you live by the media sword and you die by the media sword because he's gotten so much free press. But you get that free press by being controversial, by being offensive. And so here he is. So I'm a little surprised by these as general numbers. And I'm wondering what the sampling data is, because I know so many evangelicals and I know so many people who are hardcore constitutionalists, and I know so many people who are Democrats who have told me they won't vote for Cruz. And yet, maybe they will after the if he becomes the nominee. I don't know. I don't know what he can do to change that, but he's definitely got some work to do. But I think it's doable. And the same with Trump. I'm not even going to give you Kasich and Rubio because it doesn't matter. They're never going to get there unless we get the brokered convention. And if we get the brokered convention, and if you don't know what that is, it's real simple. Right now, because the race has tightened so much, you have people coming in and they're beginning to feed off each other. You have, in particular, Cruz and Trump. They're going to be trading wins and losses. And if they make it to the convention and they've got enough delegates to be considered a candidate, and that's, you got to win like 10 states. So Trump's already there, Cruz is close. So those two guys go into the convention, and possibly a third, maybe Rubio. There's still, but he's running out of steam. If he loses Florida, he's just finished. So let's just block him out. So now what happens is this is when the long knives come out. This is when the rules aren't really rules, because they can do whatever the heck they want. They have if they have a set protocol right now, if they have certain things written into their so-called bylaws, they can just change them in a heartbeat, because usually the establishment, because they control all the money, they know exactly who they can buy, how they can get the rules changed, and then they can do whatever they want to do. And what they want to do, if the establishment has complete control of the convention, which I believe they will, their goal would be to knock out both Cruz and Trump and put in someone like Romney or put in someone like Rubio or put in someone like Kasich and basically broker it. Now, if Rubio drops out, I don't know that he could be put. I don't think he could be put back in as a candidate. I don't think so. So there's a lot of talk now that if a brokered convention is going to come into play, then California comes into play. That's actually encouraging because for so long, I mean, for as long as I can remember, we've been largely irrelevant in the presidential elections. Our primary is way too late. Everybody, Republican, Democrat alike, they come out here, they pick up big checks and they take off. They don't care about our issues. That's part of the reason why illegal immigration has gotten so far out of hand, and it's sort of become, a litmus test for the donor class. Is if you're for amnesty, then we'll give you money, because they don't care about California, because California doesn't elect the president essentially in their mindset. Well, that could all change. That is changing right now because of the tightening of the polls, because of the additional states that Ted Cruz won. And so this is going to be a horse race down to the last primary, it looks like. And California has, it's a juicy prize because, see, we don't do winner take all by the state. We do winner take all. If you win enough of the delegates in a congressional district, and we have 53 congressional districts, you win the delegates from there. And guess what? You can actually compete. See, someone like Cruz and Trump are very close in the polling out here in California. So there's a lot of counties which are considered just write-off counties by Republicans, like Marin and San Francisco and the whole Bay Area, Central Coast. Now, the juicy prizes will be in Los Angeles County, San Bernardino County, San Diego County, the Central Valley, Fresno, Bakersfield. Those are all, feathers in your cap. You get the Republicans. There's a lot of Republicans there. The only problem is it really doesn't matter how many people are there. You could get 1 million votes and you still get the same number of delegates for the congressional district. So when you look at it that way, Trump, and I believe he's got to be looking at this, and we had, what's his name? James Lacey on last week talking about this. If he goes and starts harvesting votes and working really hard and building a little bit of a campaign in some of these outlying counties that Republicans generally don't take a look at, where you're not going to have a lot of strong Cruz people, Trump could make a race of it, and California could be extremely significant. Can you imagine if we got treated like Iowa? I mean, you got presidential candidates everywhere running around talking to us. When was the last time they did a rally here? When was the last time they came and talked about what matters to Californians? And let me tell you, illegal immigration would have to be at the top of that list, right next to national security, which, of course, is related to immigration when you look at Tafshin Malik. But it's also related to stamping out this political correctness that allowed Syed Farouk to go and carry out his evil, even though 2 years earlier he had become a person of peripheral interest to the FBI. I mean, right there, that's a question that needs to be answered. That and maybe if he could delve into the arguments on the privacy versus security with Apple and the need, obviously, to get that data and get into that phone. All of that stuff, we're the battleground. Be nice for California to be a battleground state. Anyway, 323-746-TALK. We'll take your calls and a whole lot more coming up. Hey, maybe this is the calm before the storm. This is Tim Donnelly, your host, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in the state of California. 323-746-TALK is our number. Going straight to the phones. Give me your first name and city, please.
This is Jerry from Victorville, California.
Hey, Jerry, how are you?
Well, fine, my friend. I hate to see that we're going to lose you on the radio. I hope you're going to find something else somewhere else, because we sure need you. And you certainly sure are our governor of Radio California. I don't know whether you've got something planned you don't know, but in case you don't know, I happen to be sworn in Monday before last to run for U.S. Senator from California. And you know I'm a strict constitutionalist, and I voted for you, I think, at least 2 or 3 times. So anyway, whatever you do in your life, you certainly need to continue on what you're doing. You're a strict constitutionalist. I am too. And I'd like to get a hold of you after the show if you want to and talk about something, if you can. But if you go to my website, laws, USSenate2016.com, laws, USSenate2016.com, go to the history part. It's a little long, and you'll find Tim is mentioned in my history part. So the most important thing, look, you and I know where things have been going for the last, 50, 60 years? We had a
Well, wait a minute. No, because I'm not even 50. I'm going to be 50 this year. Jerry, you got me there because you're definitely you got a few years on me. Anyway, hey, good luck in your bid and your race. And give your website. No, I'm gonna let you give your website out one more time. Go ahead. Go for it.
Okay. You go to laws for U.S. Senate 2016.com. Laws for U.S. Senate 2016.com.
Okay,
you see my
there it
history
is.
on there.
We'll let the listeners go there and check you out, because look, I've had a couple of Senate candidates on, and you are obviously have decided to take on this race. Like we say, inform, educate, and engage. Can't harm or can't blame anyone for getting involved, even though that Senate race is very crowded. And I got to tell you, I'm really concerned. Even though this is going to be a really, really good year for Republicans, we may be faced in California with 2 Democrats. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds like I'm making it up, but with the top 2, you've got Kamala Harris, you've got Loretta Sanchez. Both of them have money. Both of them have some name ID and some constituency. They've been elected to something before. And then on the Republican side, almost every one of the candidates has never been elected to any public office, period. So you just heard from Jerry. There's another guy, I believe, from the desert area named Robert Larrabee. There's Al Ramirez. There's Tom Del Beccaro. There's Rocky Chavez dropped out. He was the only Republican who had been elected to anything. He dropped out with only like $300 in his Senate account. It's dismal. And maybe, I don't know, it's a crazy idea. Maybe if the GOP would get their head out of their ass and stop attacking conservatives and maybe pick a candidate, back the candidate, put a couple $1 million into it, and try to win the race. I don't know. It's a crazy idea. But see, they don't believe they can win, so they won't even try. But they want you to give your hard-earned money to them so they can waste it not even trying. That's the part that just flips my lid, is they look at races and look, running a statewide race, a real statewide race in California like we did for governor. And you might, if you weren't aware of my governor race, I'm not going to bore you with a lot of details, but I'm going to tell you something simple, and you'll get this. We didn't raise a lot of money, something like $750,000 in a big race like that. That's nothing. But the word of mouth, it was all word of mouth. Word of mouth, we got almost 650,000 votes. And that was after the GOP spent $7.5 million stripping away my votes, attacking me, tarnishing my name, lying about me, and saying that my opponent was some kind of an amazing conservative when he's really just a Democrat. He is a Democrat. And my point, though, is we woke up so many people in so many communities who are now engaged, who are now taking over their central committees, or they're taking over their city councils. They're running candidates for school board. They've linked up with activists statewide on issues like Common Core, Child Protective Services, forced vaccination opposition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Guns. Did I forget guns? How did guns come up last? Illegal immigration. All of these issues that I fought on, that I worked on, that I was out there talking to people, and I probably met 50, 60,000 people in person in that 2 years that I was running. Why couldn't the GOP say, hey, let's find the right candidate. Let's find somebody who has some populist appeal, and let's use this Senate race. Even if we don't win, even if we don't get in the top two, let's at least have a champion who is going around spreading the word and raising the bar and educating people that there is another way, because a lot of people are hungry right now. And if they met the right representative from the conservative movement, who wasn't a bonehead, who didn't defend every stupid thing every stupid Republican's ever done, but actually talked about issues that bring people together, you might actually have a shot. But more importantly, you would be spreading a message at the right time and sowing those seeds and building a movement that is bigger than the Republican Party. It's bigger than the Democrat Party. It's bigger than the Libertarian Party. It's bigger than all the political parties, because it's all about liberty. It's about freedom. It's about demanding that our government actually protect and secure our natural rights rather than become the greatest threat to them. Hey, when we come back, Chris Ann Hall, Democrat turned constitutionalist. You will not want to miss 1 minute with her. So whatever you do, stay tuned. Hey, if you're just tuning in, where have you been? But you got here just in time. You have found your way to the Radio Free California Network. I'm your host, former California State Assemblyman Tim Donnelly, and radio governor here in the state of California. And we have an extremely special guest, someone whom I've become a huge fan of. She is Chris Ann Hall, and she is a constitutional attorney. She is a speaker. She is an educator. She is a patriot. She has a radio show, and she is spreading liberty all over this country. But she wasn't always that. She has an amazing introduction. I've put it up on our website, timdonnellyshow.com, but I'm just going to read you a little bit of it before I bring her on. She said, right up front, there's some things I need to tell you about myself. I want you to know where I come from and how I got to where I am today. I don't ever want to be accused of deception or dishonesty. So in full disclosure, I was not born a constitutionalist. I did not live my life with an inherent understanding of liberty and what it is necessary to defend it. I was not raised a Christian. She was a Democrat. And she was an environmentalist, and she was a whole lot of things. She was a biochemist for Monsanto who believed in vaccines, even though she was a vegetarian. All these things. We all come from somewhere, but she is one of the best speakers I've ever heard on the Constitution, and that's saying a lot. Chris Ann Hall, I want to welcome you to the Tim Donnelly Show.
Thank you so much for those very nice words.
So you have earned them and more.
Smile.
You have earned them and more.
I know it is.
Every time I listen to you,
it's always nice to get that encouragement.
Well, you deserve it, and every time I hear you, I get uplifted. I get the more of a backbone and feel like I'm not doing enough. And look, I know we don't have a lot of time together, but I wanted to bring you on because, well, mainly because you were one of the only people who really articulated what the Constitution says about land rights. And this is before Lavoy Finicum was murdered by our government. And you and I watched that on tape, and a lot of the country saw it and didn't know what to make of it, and until people like yourself put it into words and explain what's really at stake. But basically, he was killed because he didn't comply, because he was exposing the fact that the federal government doesn't have the right to really own any land outside of D.C., right?
That's right. Well, it's a little bit broader than that. They can, by Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, They can exercise full legislative authority over 10 miles square for the capital, and the land that is bought from the states with the permission of the states that is necessary for forts, ports, dockyards, and shipping and that sort of thing. Everything that has to do with the defense of the United States and international trade. So basically, that's what that's all about. And it has to be done, it has to be bought from the states, not just leased or managed or whatever. It has to be done at the permission of the states. And not land management of ranches and national forests and national monuments and wildlife preserves. There's absolutely no provision within the Constitution for the federal government to own or manage that land like that.
Thank you, because we for the third time, we just had Obama. I don't call him president anymore because he doesn't act like one. But we just had this man, Obama, come out here a couple, I don't know, maybe close to a year ago. He turned a national he turned a lot of our land, let me just say it that way, into a monument that is now going to be under much tighter federal control. Then he just took 2 million acres in the desert here, where we've already been pushed off of all these different trails and not allowed to walk on public land anymore at all, or drive a vehicle, or go out shooting, or do almost anything. And now they've taken even more. And I looked at the Antiquities Act. It was passed in 1906, and it's very, very skimpy. And it says that they can take the least amount of land that isn't privately controlled. But like you're saying, they're supposed to buy this. Well, they seem to own half of the western states.
Well, not only that, the Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution explains that if a federal act is not in compliance with the Constitution, it has no authority within the states. It is not the supreme law of the land, and Alexander Hamilton explained in Federalist Paper 78, if it's not in compliance with the Constitution, it is no law at all. So the federal government can create 37,000 acts, all the acts in the world that it wants, but if it expands the power over land beyond 10 miles square and forts and ports and needful buildings for forts and dockyards, then it's completely unconstitutional and it's not binding on the states. So this whole federal land management thing is not only unconstitutional, it's disingenuous, it's a flat-out lie, it's extortion, it's theft, and it's crazy because we're watching this land being taken from the people. And the only recourse they have is to go through administrative law courts. So you don't even get to sue the federal government in a real court. You sue them in a land management court where the judge is hired by the Bureau of Land Management or the Department of Interior to determine whether the Department of Interior is following its rules. We've had people who have tried to sue the EPA. In Bonner County, Idaho, they have sued the EPA all the way to the Supreme Court just so the Supreme Court could tell them that they have the right to sue the EPA. Now they have to take the process all over again. And not only that, watch over here in Nevada. We've got the federal government seizing this land. You know, the whole lie, public land for public use, and we're holding it for the people and preserving. Well, they're selling off this land. I mean, I challenge anybody to go to the Bureau of Land Management and watch how they're selling off this land that they're fleecing from the states and stealing from the people. They're selling them for oil and mineral rights as well. So the ranchers and the farmers can't drill on their land because that's huge, massive environmental problems. No fracking here. But then the BLM can sell that land for their profit to private entities who are going to come on and do the same thing.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I knew there had to be something to do with money at the bottom of all this, because it's always about following the money and you'll find the tyranny. And this is unbelievable. And look, in California and along the entire West, there's obviously been this tremendous tension. We saw it in Nevada with Clive Bundy and the standoff there, and then we just saw it up in Oregon with the occupation of the Malheur Reserve. that ended in the murder of Lavoy Finicum and the incarceration of everyone else who was in there. There's a lot at stake here for the federal government if the Constitution were actually enforced, huh?
Well, and there's a lot more at stake here for the people, because what we need to realize is that what we're seeing here is the popping off, the frothing of a steam that has been building for over 50 years. You guys know you're living in the midst of it, but these ranchers and farmers have been fighting with the federal government for over 50 years now, playing by the federal government's rules, only to find that once they get the federal government to rule even in a modicum in their favor, that the federal government turns around and then changes the rules and takes from them anyway. The really good modern example of this right now is what's going on in Red River, Texas. I mean, we've got families that are just fighting for their very lives. There's a case in Red River where the owner of the estate passed away, and the heirs of the estate were ready to take over the estate and manage the land, farm it and ranch it the way it had been done for generations throughout this land. And so the land went into probate because of, I guess, an inadequate will or some sort of thing. And while they were in probate, the Bureau of Land Management filed a claim in probate over this land. They have no hereditary right to this land whatsoever. And for 10 years now, this family has been trying to get their land out of probate because the Bureau of Land Management claims that they're an eligible heir to the land.
Oh, my God. I don't even have words for that. We've got to take a quick break.
It's tyranny. That's the only word you got.
It is. I feel like I overuse it, But we've got to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about what we can do about this. We're talking with Chris Ann Hall, who is a constitutional expert, and she is a great patriot and a great American. Be right back after this. Hey, we are talking with a Democrat turned constitutionalist who is now spreading the message of liberty across the country, and we are honored to have her here, Chris Ann Hall. She has her own radio show, The Chris Ann Hall Show, and she speaks, she writes. You need to go to her website, chrisannhall.com, sign up. I did, and I'm getting all kinds of great stuff. Just read her bio, and you will want to read everything she writes, but right now we've got her live. Chris Ann, I got to ask you. So President Obama comes out here. He makes 3 national monuments. He takes 2 million acres. One of them is called the Mojave Trails National Monument. The other is the Sand to Snow National Monument, and then Castle Mountains National Monument. 1.8 million acres total. Uses the Antiquities Act, does what Dianne Feinstein was unable to do. She was trying to push it through Congress, but the people's representatives said, no, we don't want this, because ultimately, even though there's not an immediate effect, ultimately, we believe that this will so deeply entrench the centralized government and the federal supremacy of this bureaucracy that more trails will be closed, less access will be granted, fees will be raised, and more control will be exerted over land that is public land that belongs to the people, but the people will now not be welcome on it.
Yeah, well, that science fiction movie, The Blob, that's exactly what the federal government has become. It just simply consumes and grows, and with every new consumption, it gets larger and larger and more uncontrollable. So what we need to recognize is that the president has no authority whatsoever to do what he's doing through the Constitution. And if he's doing something that is not authorized through the Constitution, then Article 6, Section 2 says it's an act with no force and no authority. If there was going to be anything happening with the land, it would be land that was purchased from the state by Congress, not by executive agency. And so, even so, the Congress is limited in the type of land that it can purchase. It cannot purchase whatever it chooses. And you cannot expand forts, dockyards, and needful buildings to be wildlife trails. So what we need to realize is that these laws have no legal effect on us. unless we assume that they have a legal effect and we act like they do.
Well, and here's what they did. This was already land that they had taken somehow from us in the past. It was under sort of federal jurisdiction by their accounting, even though it's nowhere near anywhere where you'd have a fort or a port or any legitimate need or justification. But it was done by executive order now. Now, can executive orders be reversed by a president, or can they only be reversed by a president?
Well, here's the problem. Those executive orders are not lawful, okay? So what we need to realize as a people within your state, that they are not legally binding on your state. And this is exactly what our framers wanted us to realize, that the limited nature in which the Constitution creates the federal government binds the acts of the federal government. And if they're trying to do something outside their limited delegated power, then it is no power at all. Our framers actually anticipated this federal government that we have today. They studied government, they studied human nature, and they knew that with liberty comes prosperity. But they also knew that with prosperity, people become pacified. They become pacified in prosperity, they become lazy in luxury, they become complicit and compliant in comfort. And so they realized that we needed not a kingdom where we would have to raise up arms and chop off heads, but a constitutional republic where the states, and James Madison says this very specifically to the House of Representatives in 1789. He says, look, the state legislators are the greatest opponents to the federal government, and they are the surest guards of the people's liberty. And so what's supposed to be happening in the states, or the states are supposed to be standing up to the federal government and saying, look, this executive order has no force in our state. This action of the Bureau of Land Management, the EPA, the FDA, the FFA, all these executive agencies that operate extra-constitutionally and unconstitutionally have absolutely no legal force in our state. So anything that they say, we simply will not comply with. We do not honor that to be law, and we will protect our citizens when they say we will not comply. And that's how Madison and Jefferson and John Jay and Calhoun and all these people expected us, and Hamilton expected us to act. And you know what's ironic? Chief Justice Roberts said the exact same thing in the first Affordable Care Act opinion. He said that it is up to the states to not yield to federal blandishments when they do not want to accept them as their own. He said these states are independent, sovereign, and they need to act like it.
Wow. I could listen to you all day. Look, we have a Marxist, progressive, controlled legislature in California, and they just co-opted the so-called Republicans to go along with another tax increase, and not just a handful of them, a whole bunch of them did that. And
I heard, Tim, that your California legislature doesn't even comply with California Constitution, because you don't have representation as dictated by the California Constitution. Because if your districts were split the way the California Constitution was written, you would not be able to house all the representatives in the Capitol. That's my understanding. I think that's something for the people to worth looking into.
I think you're right, and so on that vein, because there's a lot of great people out here that love liberty, that love the Constitution, that are willing to fight, but they don't know how. They don't know what. And on my show, what we try to do is inform, educate, and engage. And you've got to engage in the right battle. And so nullification seems to be one concept that is deeply misunderstood. And I wonder if there's any power to it that might help us here in the state of California.
Well, absolutely. It is. I don't think that nullification is deeply misunderstood. I think that nullification is so well understood that it makes the federal supremacists wet their pants. And so they can't handle the fact that our states were created as sovereign governments. And so they go around teaching people all of these lies about nullification so that the people cannot exercise the real power that they were delegated. I have a book called Sovereign Duty. And what I do in that book is I facilitate the directions, the plan that our framers had in mind for when our federal government gets out of control. Remember, they expected this. The lady asked Benjamin Franklin, what kind of government did you give us? He said, a republic, if you can keep it. And so they knew that there was a danger, a fragility in keeping a constitutional republic because it relied on the jealousy and the vigilance of the people to control the government. And so when they knew that this would become a problem, they had this plan in place. And my book, Sovereign Duty, outlines the mechanisms by which we take back the sovereignty of the states through constitutional sheriffs, through the proper understanding of what the Constitution is. We don't even know what the Constitution is. I mean, the Constitution is a contract. The irony is, it's the only contract where the... Yeah.
We're out of time. Is there any way I can hold you over for another maybe 15 minutes? Do you have time?
Sure.
All right. Thank you, because I don't want to miss what you're saying. Hey, we'll be right back after this. Don't touch that dial. Hey, welcome back. You have found your way to the Radio Free California Network. I am your host, Tim Donnelly, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in the state of California. We have on the line with us special guest Chris Ann Hall. She is a constitutional expert. And Chris Ann, by the way, your website, chrisannhall.com. You got to go there, sign up. You will not regret it. You will get an education in the Constitution. Nullification is what we were talking about before the break. California is in severe need of constitutional remedies because the tyranny is running amok and there's no effective opposition here at all. The Republican Party has caved. They have disappeared. They have left the building, and we're on our own.
Well, you know, nullification is in operation in California. I mean, the legalization of marijuana is nullification of federal laws. The legalization of gay marriage is nullification of federal law. Sanctuary cities are nullifications of federal law. So what we have are people within your state who are well and good with nullification as long as it matches their ideology. But as soon as it doesn't, then all of a sudden nullification's not allowed. It violates the Constitution, federal supremacy, blah, 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 blah. And so, you know, it is really rather hypocritical, the hype the negative hype that nullification actually gets.
That you make a great point. I mean, when it comes to gun laws, they want more. They want federal gun laws. They want to force California's insane infringements of the Second Amendment on everyone else. But as you say, when it comes to issues that match their ideology, all of a sudden nullification is fine. When it comes to illegal immigration, they've got no problem setting up sanctuary cities, and they don't care if American citizens pay with their lives because criminals are no longer turned over to the federal authorities. I mean,
But not only that, Tim, the federal laws are very clear. If you hide, house, hire, or provide services to, or give government loans or grants or money on the federal or state level to a single illegal immigrant, you're looking for at a possible $5,000 fine and 10 years in prison for every single infraction. That's the federal law that's on the books.
Well, we need to arrest the entire legislature, all of the Democrats and half of the Republicans. That would be fun. If we could get we would need a big bus, and then maybe we could take them off to federal prison. And California would be free.
Well, you'd have to stop by Florida. Yeah, you'd have to stop by Florida and pick up all our legislators, too. But see, we've got the other opposite in Florida. We've got a completely Republican government. and they're still violating the law. We have a federal supremacist government that hates nullification unless it's for amnesty and for the other things that, you know, they don't like. I mean, when Marco Rubio was senator here, well, I guess he still is senator, but he was in favor of in-state tuition in Florida for illegal immigrants and was pushing that. So,
well, we passed the in-state tuition a long time ago. Now we let them practice law here. We actually allow illegal aliens to practice law in a courtroom in which they are not qualified to serve as a juror.
Yeah, but if you or I, well, you know, I mean, I have a degree in law, but I'm not bar registered in California. If I tried to step up and practice law in the courtroom, then they'd haul me off to jail
and fine you, so you could help subsidize our government out here. But here's the thing. Believe me, I was the one voice. I was the John the Baptist in the wilderness on this issue because I served as a Minuteman on the border and saw what our federal government thinks of us. And that's where I really got an insight into politics and realized the Republicans weren't who I thought they were, and that the ordinary people that all thought they were, you know, welcome at the table and had somebody fighting for them didn't. Because both parties are complicit in this. You have one political class once they get in power. And on the one hand, you've got people who want slave labor. It's usually the Republicans, and then people who want cheap votes, and that's the Democrats, so they can stay in power. But it's always about staying in power or making money, and doing it at the expense of our natural rights, doing it at the expense of Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, which says the federal government shall keep each state free from invasion and thereby guarantee a Republican form of government. And those concepts, as you know, are intrinsically linked.
Yeah, we are suffering from a monopolistic duopoly, and George Washington spent a significant time of his farewell address warning us about this. But, you know, I really, before our time is up, I really, really want to let your listeners know that as overwhelming as it feels, as disgustingly corrupt as it seems, it's probably worse than what we really see. But the real reality is there is hope. There are things that we can be doing, that we should be doing. Now, there's no magic pill, there's no incantation, and we're not going to fix this overnight. But we didn't get here overnight either. We've been teaching the wrong things about the Constitution for over 150 years. And so we've just got to get back through education. Like you said on your show, my job is to educate for the purposes of liberation. So we educate to liberate. And we need to understand the value of liberty so that we will, you know, we read that our framers attached life, fortune, and sacred honor as the value of liberty, but I don't really think we believe that that's our position as well, and that's the eternal position for liberty. And if we don't catch a snap and start really living up to our obligation of liberty, because we have hope, we can change this. It's our children who are going to suffer the consequences of our negligence.
This is true. Chris Ann, can you take a call from a listener?
Sure.
Okay, you're live on air. Do you have a question for Chris Ann?
Yeah, kind of. I'm a little unconvinced that the federal government is restricted from owning or purchasing property. Basically, we have I'd point out the Louisiana Purchase, the Alaska Purchase, etc. And the former one being it took place, you know, during Thomas Jefferson as president. And
so what you need to understand is the difference between purchasing land that is not a state for the purposes of a territory, and then once a state is a state, then assuming control of that land. The Louisiana Purchase, the federal government has the authority to purchase land as far as territories. That's Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, right? Territories. Territories are not land that the federal government owns. It's land that they hold in trust for states. But once a state enters the Union, it enters the Union as a sovereign, free, and independent government, no longer controlled by the federal government. As a matter of fact, the first Bureau of Land Management created by Thomas Jefferson said that once the land becomes a state, it is to never, ever return to the federal government. So you need to understand the difference between a sovereign state and a territory held in trust for future states.
Yeah, I got that. I know there's a difference, but I'm just pointing out there is a vehicle for the federal government to own property.
Right, but it's not within California. Are you claiming that California is a territory?
No. I'm talking about the United States in general. I'm saying
right. Well, but once California became a state and entered into the Union, the land was no longer to be operated or maintained by the federal government, and so that's it. Because the federal government doesn't purchase territories for its own use. The only use of a territory is for future states.
Jefferson cited the power of treaty in his justification for this, and that's
right.
Over
and that's
into the issue of the native tribes. They were given. We formed treaties with them and gave them blocks of land that were, I think, part of states at the time. I could swear to that, but so there is this vehicle, whether it be held in trust or held by the federal government.
Yeah, but do not get confused. We are not talking about territories now. The Bureau of Land Management is not assuming territorial land. The Bureau of Land Management and these executive orders are taking land from sovereign states, and they don't have the constitutional authority to take any land from the states unless it's for forts, ports, dockyards, and the needful buildings of those things by consent and payment to the states.
So they could buy land from the state.
They can buy land from the states for the singular purpose of forts, ports, dockyards, and those types of purposes listed in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. Those are the only purposes for which the federal government can purchase land. They just can't come in and say, we are going to take this public land for public use as in claiming it to be a national monument. If they were going to do that, they would have to set up a military fort there and pay the state of California the value of that land. Not just the value of the land, but all the resources, the fair market value of that land.
Well, Chris Ann Hall, you're going to be the last word on that. I appreciate you coming on and giving us some extra time. Thank you for what you're doing to educate people, because I think there is a great deal of hope and reason to be optimistic as people are waking up all over the country. And your website, chrisannhall.com, is chock full of amazing stuff. You sign up, you get videos, you get all kinds of stuff. You've written books. Everything's available there, right?
Everything is available there. Yes, sir.
chrisannhall.com. Chris Ann Hall, thank you. God bless you in your mission. Godspeed.
Thank you.
I could talk to her all day long. I could listen to her. She does have her own radio show, chrisannhall.com. Find it, listen to her, educate yourself. And we're going to be right back after these messages with a whole lot more here on the Tim Donnelly Show. Hey, we've spent the better part of an hour with a constitutional expert, Chris Ann Hall. You can find her, all of her stuff, her writings, her links to her radio show, chrisannhall.com. That's KRISANNE hall.com. And we've also got a link up at timdonnellyshow.com where you can read her entire bio and find out how this extraordinary person came to be. She, as she said, she wasn't born a constitutionalist. She wasn't born the scholar that she has become and educated herself to be. And there's so many different issues I would have liked to have asked her about. But look, when you're that popular, your time is short. She gave us a big chunk of her day. And here's the thing. When you inform yourself and you educate others, and then you engage in real solutions. And when you hear the way she talked about the Constitution, I've never heard anyone talk about it that way, to be that knowledgeable. I aspire to be that knowledgeable. I know a little bit of the Constitution. I wish that I knew a lot more, and I have made it a promise to myself that I will learn and study to where I can become someone that can just literally quote it off the top of my head, and not just issues in areas that are of interest to me, but all of it. Because here's the thing. We look at all these politicians we have out here in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., and, you know, in your local cities and everywhere else, city government, county government everywhere, but no freedom, no liberty. How many of them do you think would even know where to look? How many of them even understand what they swore an oath to uphold and defend? Sure, we all have some loose understanding of the Constitution, much like people who go to church have a loose understanding of the Scripture, sometimes an incorrect understanding. And I would challenge you, get her books, get her videos. This will be a transformational education, because the truth is that we are facing a time when, very clearly, anyone that is paying any attention, the government has become the greatest threat to our future, to our freedom, not just to your finances, but to almost every aspect of your life. And the founders never intended it to be that way. They intended us to rule ourselves, self-government. That was the whole point. And yet, you look around. Just, you think you're free? Try to cut down a tree. And you'll find out that somebody from the city will come over and tell you need a permit, and you have to come here between this hour and pay us a fee, and then you get a permit, and then maybe you get to cut down your tree if it's, you know, deemed environmentally friendly, blah, blah, blah. And that's your private property, by the way. You want to build something, you have to beg permission, you have to pull permits, you have to bribe your government with fees. You got to pay for the school because you built something. Doesn't mean you have kids going to the school. Your kids might have already gone. You've been paying for years. I mean, but every time you turn around, there's some little chisel coming at you and chipping away at your freedom, taking from your finances, all to finance more government and more control over your life. In the mountain region where I live, there are people that want to put a city council, what they're calling incorporation. They want to incorporate the mountain region, the rim, and invite more government control over them. And then the concept is, oh wow, we'll have more representation. Well, yeah, at what cost? You're going to have to pay the salaries, and then the medical benefits, and then the pensions, and in the beginning maybe they'll siphon the money from over here, but then there'll all of a sudden miraculously be a new tax or a new fee on your property tax or on this or that or the other thing, and next thing you know, you realize that free wasn't really free, and the representation, all it is more control disguised as representation. And so when you want to cut down a tree, which right now you can do on your private property in the mountains, I know this because I do it all the time. I have plenty of trees and I take care of them. I cut them myself. I don't have to go beg the government for permission. But pretty soon, see, they look for little ways they can take over little aspects of your life. They take away a little bit of freedom here and a little bit of freedom there, and pretty soon they've created a new justification to grow the size and scope of their control. Because that's the key word. It's always about control. Control yourself. And don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. 323-746-TALK is our number. We'll go back to the phones. Give me your first name and city, please.
David, Apple Valley, California.
Hey, David, how are you?
Pretty good. Yourself?
I couldn't be better. Period.
Tim, you know, when you have callers like Christina call in, I don't know what we're going to do without you. Because
well,
they're putting on some bubblegum stupid show in your place.
Well, I'll tell you that Chris Ann Hall is I stumbled onto her when I was looking into the whole situation in Oregon. And I didn't delve into that whole thing because we've talked about it, and I really wanted to get into the land use and flesh that out, because we're facing the loss of liberty. We're facing the loss of access to land, potentially. A lot of people say, oh, no, they've turned them into monuments and I get to hunt there and everything's just peachy keen and great. Well, you know what? I don't trust the government. I don't think that they won't use the power that they've taken, and they have no right to own land for any other purpose than the ones stated in the Constitution, which, as she said, forts and ports and things that have to do with those things, period. And, but they create all kinds of new rights, and nobody knows and nobody challenges, and then we lose.
Well, nobody knows. I never knew nothing about that until you had her on there today.
Hey, I'll admit I'm getting an education, and I thought I understood the Constitution fairly well, but there's fairly well, and then there's in depth to where it becomes a weapon. And she just weaponized it. And I mean, you read her background.
Well, yeah.
This is a woman that used to be a Democrat. She used to be an environmental activist. She used to be a whole lot of things. She used to trust the government. She was a biochemist for Monsanto, of all places. And she trusted all the vaccines and had no problem with any of that. Now she's a much more educated person and has taken it to such an extreme. She's on the road 265 days a year educating people.
Yeah, we're very fortunate that a lot of people wisen up. Even Ronald Reagan was a Democrat at one time. There's some sound clip where they go in and they say, does any of this fall along with you? And he says, well, yes, of course. At one time in my life, I was a Democrat, so of course some of the fault lays for me.
That is a great clip of Sam Donaldson saying, Mr. President, you're always blaming Congress. You're blaming the Democrats. Don't you deserve some of the blame? And then he pauses, but he uses humor. I mean, I wish Trump would take a piece out of that and say something like, yeah, well, for a long time I was a Democrat. It was such a great line. Who comes up with stuff like that on the fly? Only a statesman, only somebody with a little bit of stage presence and an understanding of how to move people. It's not always with anger. It's not always with attacks. A lot of times, a little bit of humor and self-deprecating humor can take you a long way.
Yeah, it's having those comebacks.
Absolutely.
Well, Tim,
David,
yeah. But hey,
thanks for the call, my friend. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I got another caller here. 323-746-TALK. First name and city. You are live on air.
Ben with Apple Valley.
Ben, welcome to the show.
How are you, sir? So I had a lot of stuff I was going to bring up, but I got hung up because that woman is wicked smart.
Oh my gosh, that's a great description.
So I grew up with an elected sheriff that on his toolbox in his garage always had that picture of the BLM officer holding his gun up against a rancher. And I always wondered what it was really about. My father, I've said this before on the show, but I mean, true patriot, constitutionalist, somebody I'm trying to get to run for office to maybe try to fix some of our problems. But I never really got it until when you listen to her talk and you listen to her defense of what we are really standing up for. It just says it all. I could listen to her talk for 24 hours a day, seven days a week. So
yeah,
I want to thank you for having her on, and I'm going to look her up, and I'm going to delve into that because she's incredible.
Well, she does a half-hour show in the morning, and it's on YouTube. So she has a podcast just like we do. And she has thousands of people listening to that. I found her. I'd had friends tell me about her years ago, but I didn't pick up on it. And this woman is a rock star. When you listen to her speak, when she gets on one of those rants, I don't want to interrupt. I don't want to ask a question. I just want to.
No, you don't. You want to leave her alone and just let her talk.
That's it. And we have these.
I won't take any more of yours, sir.
Well, it's not ever an imposition, my friend Ben. It is the whole purpose of the show is to get your voice here to get people informed so they can educate others and engage. And I think we both agree, chrisannhall.com, tremendous resource.
Yeah, understood. Liberty to death, my friend. Fight the good
Liberty
fight.
or death. Thanks. Godspeed. Hey, 323-746-TALK. It is always a pleasure to speak to you. And, you know, here's the takeaway from the guest, who basically, I only scheduled one guest for today because I didn't want to clutter the show. I was hoping I'd be able to keep her longer, and she was amenable. Sometimes people aren't. But the point is, when you look at her history, all of us start somewhere. She started somewhere very different than where I've ever been, and she's gone someplace way beyond anything I ever dreamed. And that inspires me. I'm hoping that inspires you to some action, to understand that it isn't up to they to do something about it. Because if you look around, you'll discover something. There is no they. There's only we. There's only us. There's only you and I. And we are going to live with the consequences of our action or our inaction. And in the end, what I have sworn to myself, and what I hope someday to inspire in others to swear to themselves, is that I will die on the battlefield defending liberty, defending our natural rights, and standing up for what we believe in. And I say that metaphorically. I don't mean literally die, but I mean put everything on the line so that what you hand off to your children and your children's children is a better world. Not just a better world because we pick up litter. Not just a better world because we figured out, how to not destroy the environment and be good stewards of it and all that good stuff. I give environmentalists a hard time, but it's really environmental extremists and environmental tyrants and environmental fascists, the eco-tyrants who just want power for power's sake. They're no different than your garden variety fascist. What I'm talking about is personal responsibility. Years ago, when I was a kid, we used to dump our oil in the backyard, and it filtered down into the water table and caused problems. We don't do that anymore. We take it off and dump it. It's recycled, and that's what we do as citizens to protect our environment. And, once you're educated, you don't even need a law to make you do it. You do it because it's the right thing to do. You do it because you care. You do it because you want clean water. You do it because you want to do your little part. And right now, it ain't about all those nice, pretty little things. It's about a much deeper, darker fight for our fundamental natural rights and our liberty. That's what's truly at stake. And that, to me, that is a sacred fight, and one in which I hope you will join me. 323-746-TALK. We'll be right back after this. 323-746-TALK. We're taking your calls. Give me your first name and city, please. You're live on air.
This is Nadine Hayes.
Hi, Nadine. How are you?
I'm doing okay. Hey, you guys rock.
Well, we try. And Nadine, where are you calling from?
Okay, I'm down in the Los Angeles area. I live in Camarillo.
Wow, that's a long way to pick up the show. You must listen online.
Yes. Yes, I do. Actually, I wanted to tell this is Tim that I'm talking to, right?
This is Tim.
Hey, Tim, I wanted to tell you, I thought that your motorhome rocked.
Oh, thank you. You mean the one that we had when I ran for governor a couple years ago?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Are you going to run again?
Well,
I'd vote.
That was a you don't realize how big a task it is to run in a state as big as California. It's like its own country. There's 38 million people, and I only met like 60,000 of them in person. It was crazy.
Yeah, no, it's unreal. You stop to go look at a map. Look at the size of most countries over in Europe. There you can put lots of them inside of California, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And look, like on a day like today, yesterday I was down the hill. It was gorgeous. It was stunning. I was down in the San Diego Fallbrook area. And then today, it was like 75 yesterday. It was gorgeous. Today, it's snowing. We had a blizzard, and then we had another blizzard, and it was just amazing. And that's California, and you can drive right down the mountain and go to the beach and go swimming.
Yeah.
We have a majestic...
One year, I went water skiing at Marine Stadium in Long Beach, and the next day I went snow skiing at Big Bear.
There you go. There you go. And by the way, if you want to go snow skiing, bring your chains because the roads are a mess. They weren't expecting it. And at any rate, Nadine, obviously you called for something. So you like Chris Ann Hall, huh?
I just, like I said, I haven't been listening for a long period of time to what you've been talking to, and I probably should have. I don't know. Am I out of line to bring up a different topic, or are you
not at all.
A particular?
No,
okay.
we'll take it. You tell me what you called in about, and we'll see if we can talk about it.
Okay. How about Homeland Security?
Well.
Okay. Let me tell you where I'm at. This is how I've been spending my day. I'm a pro se litigant in federal court down in the Los Angeles Central District. Because in 2012, well, first of all, I am a political activist, okay? So we've got something in common right there, right?
Right.
I became involved with, get this, both the Occupy movement as well as Tea Party. But it was Tea Party. It wasn't Tea Party Patriots. I mean, it's Tea Party Patriots, not the original Tea Party, which I guess was allegedly formed with the Koch brothers and all that.
No. Let me help you out. The Tea Party was formed in the 1700s, and it's never left.
Back to that one.
It lives in our hearts. It doesn't know Republican or Democrat. It only knows liberty and tyranny. And tyranny is winning right now, and liberty is gearing up for a fight. So give me the short version, because we can't go deep into your case and everything, because I don't know what good that's going to do. But what?
Well, the shortened version. In 2012, I was arrested by the LAPD, brutally arrested and incarcerated at the Los Angeles Metro Detention Center for talking to the public with amplified sound. That it fell within the guidelines for the amplified sound ordinance in the city of Los Angeles. So they didn't cite me for violating the amplified sound ordinance. They cited me for violating the amplified noise ordinance.
Well, it sounds like you were trying to exercise your free speech. Am I getting this right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of the things that I talk about are the bad things that are going on in our country, including with the federal government. And I think that that's kind of why I got targeted. Needless to say, what's going on, and I'm just about ready to have the magistrate judge recuse himself because he's being very, very biased and prejudicial towards my opposition, and if they prevail,
are you facing like charges? Are you facing a fine?
No.
What's the deal?
Okay, they brutally arrested me and incarcerated me, and they never prosecuted me. So I'm suing them civilly in federal court. Now,
Okay.
the magistrate judge says, I can't sue them for false arrest because there was a law and I violated that law, so they had probable cause. That's the magistrate judge's opinion in the matter. And I said, Your Honor, probable cause, as defined by the Supreme Court, needs to consider all the circumstances, not just a tiny little bit of the picture. You know, the
now,
fact that the
are you doing this with an attorney? Do you have an attorney representing you?
No, I'm going to law school via the School of Hard Knocks and doing it myself.
You are going pro per and standing up to the government. Look, I applaud you for standing up for your rights. And
well, you know, we all have to. And we don't have to waste our money with attorneys. Do you know that there was an original 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that stated that members of nobility, of which esquire, you know, the title given to lawyers, is, that members of nobility were not supposed to be allowed to be government officials? But that got wiped away. It was on the books for like 50 years. So, you know, if you stop and think about it, we could clean out Congress and the Senate probably pretty quick.
Get rid of all the lawyers? I think if you pushed an amendment for that, it would be universally supported across party lines, across demographic lines, and it would be a win-win. Nadine, good luck in your fight, and God bless you for standing up and for exercising your First Amendment. We're going to have to take a break here, but I want to thank you for calling in.
Tim, can I just throw in a real quick thing?
You got literally about 45 seconds. Go.
Okay. I was housed in what I'm calling a secret prison in Los Angeles. It was like 300 cell solitary confinement, and I was the only one placed in there. And the city attorney is refusing to show me where I was confined.
Wow,
so
that's kind of strange.
It's not strange. It's very creepy. It's very creepy. And I know, Tim, you are aware of what is going on behind closed doors. And it's not a pretty picture, because now the patriots, who are the political activists that are fighting to get their country back, are now labeled by the government as anti-government and therefore terrorists. And good old Wesley Clark has made a public statement saying we all need to...
I'm very aware that, yes, they have decided to call us terrorists if we effectively oppose them on various things, and that's how and why they feel they were justified in taking the life of Lavoy Finicum. I see it as an assassination, political in nature. Anyway, Nadine, we're out of time. God bless you and Godspeed. We will be right back after this. Hey, you have found your way to the one and only Radio Free California Network. I am Tim Donnelly, your host, former California State Assemblyman and radio governor here in the state of California. And we've just been having a conversation today about liberty and tyranny, and I just had to get off the presidential race. I know I gave you a little bit of an update, but, you know, after a while, it just grinds on the nerves. Look, we'll re-engage with that tomorrow. There's a primary in Michigan, and the bottom line is whoever becomes president isn't going to be able to fix this. They might be able to bust open a door or two. They might be able to clear the alligators out of the moat and build a bridge over it so that the people can get back into their government, into the people's house. But the reality is it's on us. It's up to us to educate ourselves. It's up to us to know what our legislators are up to, whether they be at the state level or the federal level. It's up, or city or county, wherever. Every governing body deserves a hawk, a watchful eye that was supposed to be the purview of the press. The power of the press was granted in the First Amendment in order to keep an eye on the government, hold them accountable, report on what they're doing. But see, now with the need to just entertain rather than inform, it's become about access. It's become about interviews and being able to get the big wigs on your show. See, I don't care about the big wigs. I care about patriots. I care about activists. I care about people who will actually go and fight for the only thing worth fighting for, which is the great cause, the one great cause, which is liberty and the protection of our natural rights. I mean, when the government threatens your natural rights, what do? You hear people calling in who say they fought the government and they wound up under the jail. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that happens. Lavoy Finicum stood up to the government. He spoke well. He refused to comply. He was exercising his First Amendment right to seek redress of his grievances from his government. Now, some people might disagree that he was in there and that the group was armed. If they weren't armed, they would have been thrown out on day one. They would have marched in there and they would have dragged them all out. They decided they wanted to make a stand a certain way. They weren't shooting at cops. They weren't shooting at the federal authorities. They were literally standing there on the Constitution and demanding accountability and refusing to comply with a government that has, I mean, you talk about armies. If you could take all the bureaucrats, just the ones who work for the federal government, and if numerically you could defeat another army just by the numbers that you had under arms, you would literally outmatch almost every army in the world. That's how many bureaucrats we have. We have so many government agencies, and many of them got their start from an authority crafted by Congress that is outside of constitutional authority. And as a result, you now have, and here's the strange thing. You remember when they were pushing Obamacare through? They talked about the 16,000 IRS agents who are going to enforce Obamacare. And by the way, IRS agents are able to be armed with M16s. So they can own a more powerful weapon than you can own, because in California, you got your little AR with its bullet button. And they've got selective, they can put it on selective fire and shoot 3-round bursts, and they can have 30-round clips. They can have armor-piercing ammo. You can't. All for what? To keep you in line, to force you to comply. There's a big difference between keeping the peace, between like our local sheriffs who are local to us, who are of us, keeping the peace, keeping law and order, big difference, than having a federal army march into your state and force you to buy some product you don't want, force you to comply at gunpoint, or they take money from you when you do your tax return. Why do we have 97,717 IRS personnel when with computers today everybody could do their return on one on something the size of a postcard if you had to mail something in, or they could literally just do it online and pay with a credit card or get your refund right to your bank account without any paperwork. Think of all the mountain not mountain, that's a wrong metaphor. Think of the forest. All the trees that could be saved if we got rid of the IRS. Think of all the productivity. Think of the incredible, it would be like a ship that is sinking under the weight of its own cargo. And you throw the cargo overboard. You tell the IRS agents, hey, see you later. We don't need you anymore. And go out and get a real job. Go out and get a job in the private sector. Start contributing rather than just taking. And you know, if you think I'm being hard on them, this is the agency, this is the organization that wanted to silence the Tea Party. And I don't mean the organized Tea Party, whatever that is. That came later. The real Tea Party is just all of us who felt a certain way. I remember in February of 2009 going to a gathering. It was the John and Ken show down in Fullerton. 20,000 plus people there, of every walk of life, of every age, of every race, of every economic class, and every political persuasion. We had one thing in common. We didn't trust our government anymore, and we want accountability. We're sick and tired of paying taxes and more taxes and more taxes, all so that a government can force us to comply. A government can try to control every aspect of our lives. A government can try to seize our natural rights and become a threat to our future, to our kids' educational future, to our economic future, to the idea, you talk about the American dream or the California dream. How many times has a government agency crushed it? How many times has a person been thrown in prison for violating something that shouldn't be even on the books, that is not in the spirit of the law by any stretch of the imagination? When you begin to make criminals out of the citizenry in order to keep the mechanism of the machinery and the gears lubricated with their blood and their freedom and their sweat and their tears, when that becomes necessary, then it is obvious and apparent to enough of the populace that they are just slaves to the system. And at that point, that's when you're really close to a revolution. You're either going to have one at the ballot box, and that is my prayer, or God forbid at the cartridge box. And if that happens, God help us all. Because there's something like 370 million guns I read recently. It used to be like 310. So there's been a lot of gun buying in recent days, in recent years, especially under Obama. But here's the thing. We're not talking about inconsequential things. We're not just talking about insider baseball politics. If you want that, you can roll down the dial and find somebody who will chitter, the chattering classes, as I like to call them. For me, this is deeply personal. For me, this is what it's all about. This is what has motivated me since I was a boy, was knowing that one day our government would become a threat to our freedom and our natural rights, and we are there. And it's time that we get involved and we reverse this course before it's too late. And when I say get involved and reverse this course, I mean you figure out what part you're supposed to play in your community, whether it's running for office, whether it's standing up and speaking at a meeting where you're terrified, where you're shaking, where your insides feel like they're going to... well, you know what I mean. Because usually you feel that way, but you never say a word. And then later you beat yourself up and you have regret because you were too afraid. Well, here's the funny thing. Just like Chris Ann Hall came from a different place, I used to be terrified to speak at meetings. I used to be terrified to go to meetings. I couldn't even go to my kids' open houses. I would go sit in the car because I was so afraid of people. Yeah, that's where I started. So if I can do it, if she can do it, anyone can. 323-746-TALK. 323-746-8255 if you're driving. Final segment coming right up after this. Yeah, I've been talking about a lot of things today, but going deep after having Chris Ann Hall on. And if you missed that segment, look, you've got to go to the podcast tomorrow. Sean puts them up every day, the day after, and scroll through me, okay? Skip all my blathering and just get to her right at the 406 spot It's on YouTube. That's our podcast. And share it with your friends because, you know, this show is not just a commercial enterprise. It is a mission. It is something that I did because I believe that one man, one woman can make a difference. And when you connect with someone like that, and no wonder she's so hard to get on air. I had to book it a long time in advance. I wanted to have her on when all the craziness was happening in Oregon. She was the only one who could really explain it in a way that made so much sense. But when she starts talking about the Constitution, I just get chills because she knows it inside and out. She doesn't need a teleprompter. She doesn't need to look anything up. She knows it, and there's a tremendous amount of power in that. And I know it's not sexy to go around talking about the Constitution. Our political leaders often don't. There is one. Ted Cruz talks about it quite a bit. But it generally is not something that is going to get you elected, sadly, regrettably. But what I would say is I'm glad that it's making such a comeback, and I'm excited about what we can do to safeguard our freedom and our natural rights. 323-746-TALK. Going back to the phones. You're live on air. Give me your first name and city, please.
Yeah, it's Chris from Peeling, California.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Just fine. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic.
Great. I'd just like to say that you've been a great asset, and I believe that there's no way you should be quitting your radio show. You bring insight to California politics, Washington politics. You have an avenue for people to hear personal accounts of how these people think. And you're a great asset to the common man. And I don't think you should quit your radio station. You are a very valuable personality to the high desert area.
Well, Chris, I am deeply humbled by your words, and I'm glad that you feel that connection because that is what the goal was. And I don't have anything. I don't have anything more I can say about that at the moment. But just whatever you do, stay tuned till the very end, and all will become clear. But look, Chris, I want to thank you for that call and say God bless you and Godspeed, my friend. I find myself at a loss for words. That's a very, very humbling call. And I got to say that it's been a tremendous honor, and I'm going to miss all of you. And I'm not going to go into all this right now. Today is what? What day are we on? Somebody help me out here. I think it's Monday, because I know yesterday was Sunday, and I was I did some therapy yesterday. I threw some lead down range. I had to go to an indoor range because I was going to go to an outdoor one with a friend, and it was pouring rain in the mountains, so I asked for a rain check, and then I felt like an idiot because I got down the hill and it was sunny and gorgeous. But anyway, I was on my way down to the San Diego area and had an incredible time, just practicing and training and exercising what is a natural right that is recognized by the Constitution. I don't like when people call rights constitutional because we don't get them from the Constitution. The Constitution carves out and acknowledges rights that we get from the Creator, and the ability to defend your own life and your freedom from tyranny and your property and the lives of your loved ones. Those are inalienable rights that no one gave you here on earth. No one but the Creator. They're divine in nature. And yes, the weapon of choice, the tool that we use to effect that is a firearm. Yes. But it's under assault, as you know. And here's the real question. I mean, there's a lot of threats right here in the state of California. They're coming after the bullet button. They're coming after pretty much all detachable magazines. They want to regulate with this ballot initiative by the gubernatorial candidate Gavin Newsom for the Democrats. Wants to take your property if you have any magazines that contain more than 10 rounds. Well, I can tell you right now, I do, and you can go pound sand. I don't care what words you put on paper. You're not stealing my stuff. I paid for it, so you can go screw off. You don't have a right to pass a law and then make what I have already legally and lawfully bought illegal. And you know what? That's the attitude we need to take toward them. And you'll have a chance to work on that. Man, just when I get going, we run out of time. Thanks to Sean McNeil, our chief engineer, all of our sponsors, and you, especially you. God bless you, and Godspeed. Tim Donnelly Show out.